Reimagined science demonstrations that exploit smart technology. Peter Colin Hill. Glenbrook Advanced Concepts Institute, Glenbrook, NSW, Australia. Abstract. The reasons for using demonstrations to teach science and the scale of organization required by schools to deliver this solution are outlined. The benefits of electronic enhancement are higher quality control of scientific concepts, electronic tracking of inventory, and distributed manufacture. Introduction. A scientific demonstration is a procedure carried out for the purposes of demonstrating scientific principles. If you have graduated from high school, it is probable that you have seen hundreds of them. You might remember having your hairs stand on end when you touched a Van der Graaf generator or a magnet moving a compass needle. Unless you were to take science a lot further, you would most likely be unaware of the considerable number of misconceptions you have gained at school. What if we could go through the shelves of demonstrations, organize some of the smaller ones, make some simpler to set up, and better still show new ones that would normally require a skilled scientist to perform? An apparatus formulated in your mind is a science demonstration reimagined. If your ideas worked sufficiently well, they could be the seeds of a new generation of science demonstration. This paper takes up the discussion of reimagined demonstrations at the point of exploring 3 viable prototypes we have developed. It continues on to describe the lockstep advances in applying technology integrated with strategy. The discussion concludes by pondering how it is that we have become beholden to misconceptions in the first place. You would expect they are somewhat of a burden to those who you impart them to. Snapshot. A snapshot of a technologically reimagined science demonstration boils down to a traditional apparatus interfaced to electronics. When you encounter it, you will see the familiar demonstration inside a clear box connected to what is essentially mobile phone parts. As said, this is only a snapshot. This paper gives further details that expands upon this picture. The backstory for this snapshot introduces an educator who is intrigued as to why we wind up teaching so many misconceptions, and puzzles how we could extract ourselves from this situation. For most, a perspective outside the mainstream is probably not the first thing we listen to. The reimagined demonstrations appear to work, but it is hard to place them in existing context. If you were to ask, you'd be told that everything is fine with the old system. The plot twist is the collision of 2 cultures, science and education. Can we master the new technologies of the day to unlock solutions to the problems we encounter? What are some of the challenges brewing in the minds of the old guard? Unlike a film or a play, all is not resolved with loose ends tied up. This paper tells the story so far. Do the prototypes we will hear about and the problems that they solve light the way to a future classroom in which the first explanation a child will hear is not contaminated with misconceptions? The science fiction humorist Douglas Adams made the following insightful, if not irreverent, observation. Technology is a word that describes something that doesn't work yet. This captures the central challenge of this paper in that we have a promising array of prototypes that applies recently available technology to school science demonstrations, but if the definition of working is uptake in classrooms, then we are not there yet. We are pursuing a development trajectory that when the technology components do finally function together, not only will they be deemed to work, but not adopting the solution will be paramount to negligence. A lofty target, but as this paper describes, there are encouraging signs of progress. Firstly, we contrast what people hope demonstrations are going to do with what actually happens. The picture emerges that it is not just contraptions sitting on shelves, but a veritable swarm of cottage industries abuzz in each school skillfully tending them. We then establish the benefits possible from upgrading from a horse and buggy era to the metaphorical equivalent of driverless cars. We use the investors' go-no-go jargon of crystallizing so-called killer apps. These are the features that are recent. If the reimagined demonstrations have them, they will ensure future market uptake. We then acclimatize the reader to a strategy mix we term as expeditionary. Rather than follow a single strategy, we dynamically apply a range of strategies where they work most effectively to maintain the momentum of development towards an objective. The strategy of demonstrating and explaining quantum mechanics, a field not yet covered by existing demonstrations, as a suitable primary objective is explained. Finally, details are given on progress in key areas. These include demonstration of quantum mechanics, expanding the range of student development levels addressed, and manufacturability. The purpose of demonstrations. Every high school has amassed at least 500 demonstrations. They hold them as their body of evidence they call upon to convince their students that science actually works. To uncover how all this operates, we consider the answers to 3 questions. Question 1. What is it about demonstrations that makes them so compelling? They make science real. If the workings of some phenomenon have already been discussed, then seeing is believing. If not, students are intrigued and are moved to ask, I wonder what is causing that. It is unquestionably a testimony on the issue from nature herself. A demonstration that is handed over to students to figure out for themselves is called a practical demonstration. This term is variously contracted to practical or just prac. The reason for using demonstrations is that they lay an authentic foundation upon which we hope students will go on to build their own rigorous understanding. Question 2. How can we get our students to see as many of these demonstrations as possible? There is a well-honed system that efficiently cycles each one out of storage, presents it and takes it back again. A succession of demonstrations is selected so they appear naturally to track the flow of the syllabus. Nowadays students can learn from a significant number of these demonstrations thanks to an operation that has grown in size over the decades. An estimate of the scale of this operation can be calculated using some approximations. A typical high school has 1,000 students. They are divided into 6 levels. Each level is further divided into 6 classes of 25 to 30 students. Each class requires at least 2 demonstrations per week spanning 36 instruction weeks. In New South Wales alone there are over 800 high schools. In total they employ over 1,000 specially trained staff to manage these demonstrations behind the scenes. We do not feign to be accountants, but offer an estimate based on consumables, wages and on costs of 65 million Australian dollars. This is in the context of a 2019 budget of $18.5 billion odd. The answer to question 2, about the practicality of showing thousands of demonstrations day after day, is to scale up and industrialize. This means spending 0.4% of the education budget. Given the impact of demonstrations, it is critical to get this 0.4% right. Future options could be to vary the spend or increase the productivity. The latter is the line of inquiry taken by this paper. Question 3. At the end of the day, where does this parade of demonstrations actually get the students? The standard proviso, when you get to university you will be told to forget everything you ever learned at school, indicates that the answer to this question is probably not simply a high-quality understanding. There is often an alignment between an accessible textbook description, past and upcoming exam papers, recollections of what the teachers themselves learned years ago in their school days, and what are, when all is said and done, profound misconceptions. Year after year students draw electrons that are smaller than the nucleus. They also firmly believe clocks on a train appear to run at the same speed as it approaches and recedes from the observer. These ideas are deeply flawed but stipulated by the educational frame of reference and so rarely get challenged. There is a token interest in the feedback from scientists, but teachers have insufficient understanding to credit the significance of what scientists are trying to tell them. This paper tells the story of pressing the pause button on current ineffective piecemeal objections and working on a more coordinated strategy that figuratively places a under new management sign on the demonstrations. Electronic enhancement of demonstrations uses programmable logic controls, PLC, and computers built within the demonstration to inject expert analysis that upgrades the presentation and support material. The same electronics that assists in the presentation also allows migration of the demonstrations into a modern asset management system. Finding killer apps. Building demonstrations into regularly shaped boxes that incorporate tracking telemetry connected to the web will facilitate storage and retrieval. Add to this electronics sensors and digital displays, and in the eyes of students the demonstrations come to life. If this were to be proposed in 1960 it would be seen in the realm of science fiction. Now it is a plausible application of existing technology. Just 10 years ago Uber, the cashless economy, RFID library book tracking were proposed systems that were consigned by many at the time to overly enthusiastic, unrealistic speculations. Upon alerting teachers of the current technologies that are already up and running in other fields, it seems a small step to ask, why aren't we using these ideas in our school demonstrations? The typical response from teachers has been clearly it is possible now, but it is not going to sort out my sock drawer. The general feeling was, as we have an existing solution, any benefit gained from using this technology would be outweighed by the complexity and the risks of failure. On the ground, in prep rooms staffed by laboratory assistants, a seemingly constant stream of demands leaves little room for new ideas. A typical order might be for a bag of balloons and markers for a practical, student activity that demonstrates to students our expanding universe. Galaxies are drawn on the surface of the balloon and move away from each other as the student inflates the balloon. Because the salaries and consumables are prepaid, it is thought of as being for free. Entrepreneurs who are ahead of the market navigate through what is known as the status quo bias by asking what is the killer app. Although killer app is an informal term in common use, it requires definition here. A feature, function, or application of a new technology or product which is presented as virtually indispensable or much superior to rival products. Killer app #1, deliver genuine science content. Electronically enhanced science demonstrations could dramatically reduce misconceptions, directly by improving the rigor of concepts presented and indirectly by enabling students to tinker and so validate what they see. As an example, we will look at a demonstration that shows the quantum spin of electrons causing a pendulum to rock when it is pushed by changing magnetic fields. Its formal title is the Einstein-de Haas experiment. Being a direct demonstration of quantum mechanics, it is a first of its kind in an area which has been largely off limits to schools. This working prototype was developed as its setup is so involved that it can only be demonstrated by employing electronic enhancement. The current demonstration is seen in a clear plastic box that, on being plugged into a mains socket, demonstrates the pendulum motion via a laser beam that bounces off an attached mirror and emerges through the lid. Battery versions will simply detect its environment and begin working on voice command. The following walkthrough builds a picture of how this demonstration will be shown to students. Description of the role played by electronic enhancement is included. The teacher on planning the lesson selects the demonstration from a drop-down list. In storage, the unit self-tests confirming its availability. A red dot badge on the student's education phone app alerts them to preparatory material. A folder of texts, videos, and adaptive podcasts are now accessible to students via the app. As adaptive podcasts have only recently been feasible, and few have direct experience of them, we will now go into sufficient detail to explain how they work. For certain types of students, and at certain phases of development, this could prove to be a key enabler, and therefore merits careful explanation. The adaptive podcast we have so far developed is based on a core text document containing section headings. These are preview, lesson, main points, point explanations, question from the explanation, correct answer, and alternative incorrect answers. A program interprets a request for a type of podcast and then synthesizes a script by splicing together the appropriate sections from the core text document. The student selects the appropriate level of difficulty, speed, pitch, language, gender, and accent. Google WaveNet Cloud Text-to-Speech has been judged as remarkably close to human delivery. The podcast can be streamed or downloaded. Students can listen during their commute to and from school, or as an in-class lesson. In the latter context, the answers to the multiple choice are given at the end of the test for in-class correction or the student responses papers collected and scanned. During private study, students can respond by keyboard, touch screen, voice recognition, or shaking their phone. The motivation is to offer the opportunity to learn while on transport to and from school. Looking for other such time windows, we have trialed proof of principle tutoring using the touch screen on a gym treadmill. Here the student learns while exercising. It is at this point teachers have asked for clarification: can we have the adaptive podcasts without electronically enhanced demonstrations? Or the other way around? The answer is yes, but we have assessed that both these technologies are coming and work well with each other using the same infrastructure. At the lesson, the unit can use digitally synthesized speech to address the students directly synchronized with an electronic whiteboard display. The components named as they are illuminated. Using information gained from the preliminary work of students, the unit can ask questions addressing students by their first name. Modern machine speech has remarkably natural intonation, which has been well received by students. Although there is a clear advantage in teachers explaining expert opinions rather than experts puzzling on what must have been the likely thinking behind teacher explanations, there is provision to customize the science down to a level that the teacher is comfortable with. As different misconceptions are selected, warning alerts are provided. The content provided is peer-reviewed and, like any online software, regularly updated. We propose to have demonstrations operating in parallel in different sites, allowing variations and collecting performance data. Recording of teacher feedback spoken into the box at the end of each session will appear on the unit icon in the asset software. This would allow for evolutionary development of the demonstration. The feedback obtained to date has not been confined to conceptual accuracy, but engineering controls and features designed so students are able to validate concepts. For the quantum physics demonstration, students can apply magnetic field to insulating glass, non-magnetic copper, and insulating but magnetic ferrite. The last option only displays motion and therefore directs the student's thought. Killer app #2, Smart Inventory. The first difference seen on entry into a demonstration storeroom that houses electronic enhanced units is that the irregularly shaped apparatus will be reduced to occupying only a few shelves. The rest of the store will have stacks of transparent document boxes. Some are single document boxes, others are multiples fused together. Each has Arduino or Raspberry Pi inside connected to power banks. These charge by external contact to voltage rails or through stack charging. In the last mode, the top of each box forms the docking station for the next unit. The units charge in storage and report their health by Wi-Fi. Linked to the order system, they use monitoring of Wi-Fi strength to triangulate their position to refine their GPS location. Once they are ordered, they write the class particulars on their electronic paper label. These are just like ink printed labels but have wires connecting them to the Arduino or Raspberry Pi. This is the technology of Kindles and uses electrostatic fields to rotate microspheres that flip to reveal a black underside. Regions of electric field darken to form letters. When the assistant enters the storeroom, the first of the items lights up. Different job lots glow different colors. If the item has not been located, a customized ringtone can be issued. As one item is selected, the next in sequence alerts. Because units have GPS and local area tracking, they don't necessarily need to return to base. In the scenario that due to expansion some classrooms are at a different end of the campus, a unit can be stored locally in a cupboard hibernating on battery power. As it's not a mobile phone, the power banks are a supermarket item. Notionally, in extreme cases, the unit could request an auxiliary power supply be installed. The units can software update or via use of their electronic ink labels have themselves shipped for firmware upgrades or end-of-life recycling. Units could tour outside the institutional setting, circulating through preschools, servicing ill children, homeschooling, remote communities speaking local dialects, diplomatic missions, cruise ships, and community groups such as University of the Third Age. These extra-institutional applications have little direct interest to those running the day-to-day of demonstrations. The extraterritorial applications seem even further beyond their consideration. A consortium of NGOs and technology firms with support from crowdfunding could drop in short-term ready-to-go STEM schools into disaster regions. Shipping containers stocked with shelves of demonstrations and resource materials could be transported. Integration of solar panels and satellite communication would allow standalone operation. Fold-out shelter classrooms could allow remote teaching from donor countries. This could operate in the time window between the disaster and conventional rebuild of infrastructure. When the mobile school has finished its mission, it can be refurbished and held in readiness. Killer App #3, Crowd Manufacture. Of the 3 demonstration prototypes currently developed, 90 to 100% of the components are off-the-shelf and require only a soldering iron, screwdrivers, wire cutters, wire strippers, and a shipping address. In a notional scenario, we begin with a relative of the person who will assemble the demonstration. There is Christmas or a birthday, and they are looking for a suitable gift. Following suggestions from social media, the relative finds the Learn Through Building website. They can notify their online social group who can contribute to the purchase of the present. The construction of a demonstration is assessed, giving the builder a certified crypto qualification using blockchain. They can currently select from primary school, duck dancers to Doctor Who. Middle school, general purpose school lab. Senior school, Einstein's quantum pendulum. An order placed will generate component orders that will be aggregated and shipped to the recipient. To account for the 10% not off the shelf, some component mounts have to be 3D printed while the quantum pendulum support has to be set in resin, then shipped. Our notional manufacturer may find support from knowledgeable family members or the online open source community that currently supports a variety of hobbies from building your own component projects. Discussion boards and videos keep users viably engaged. The demonstrations can be built in stages. The first might be the benchtop demonstration of the effect, with subsequent orders for the packaging, battery banks, and GPS. This is efficient as components are delivered just in time, and in reality, a fraction of people will lose interest or find something else of higher priority. The initial teacher perspective on this is that a significant fraction of the population will not have the skill to assemble kits and are likely to produce topical popular demonstrations in favor of the prosaic ones that may be required. Strategy appraisal. As this development is not part of some organization's program or attracting funding, the question of what to do next is more what can be done next. This simply means that the strategic context needs to be reformulated and refined and move a few steps ahead. Thus far we have painted a picture of science education stuck in a rut and a new strategy of scientists sending in a form of robotic cavalry. We have passed the fair enough criteria, with cleaner, more robust explanations, something reminiscent of driverless cars in terms of the behind-the-scenes management, and a contemporary approach to distributed manufacture. How very STEM. Most of the time scientists are pictured as playing a support role in the context of the main drama. Think Scotty in the engine room of the Enterprise in Star Trek. However, there are occasions where science and leadership combine. Think Douglas Mawson's Arctic expeditions. The Huskies had to be attached to the sleds of provisions and equipment. The information on the ground had to be fed back into the teams. The teams set out to explore the whole region, heading off simultaneously to different objectives. The elements of science practice, as described in the textbooks, can be identified but embedded at key points. The scientific method, also known as induction, is explicitly used in a stage of prototype development in which the prototype is designed for induction. This is the middle phase called the research prototype. It is preceded by the concept prototype for design of the research prototype and followed by the production prototype for beta testing. The use of double-blind testing and statistical evaluation of results are simply the benchmark data quality levels before any concrete claims are made. As with expeditions of old, different perspectives have different objectives. A clear education objective is to increase the bandwidth of who is using demonstrations and what they can teach. Thus, of the three prototypes, one covers the traditional syllabus, one is aimed at engaging a general and primary school audience, and the last of the three aims at ideas outside the current range. Near, middle, far. A clear science objective is to scope out post-1920 science that can be understood but not comprehended. We can understand one, but we can't comprehend it. We can understand wave functions, we can draw mathematical pictures of our understanding, but we can't comprehend them from our day-to-day experience. Particles have spin, something called 2-2 symmetry, which has double rotation or 720-degree symmetry, which, living out our existence in 2-3 symmetry, we can understand but not comprehend. In expedition parlance, rather than turn our back on post-1920 science because it is too hard, we are seeking out trig points. Such points are markers on the top of hills or mountains that map makers used to find their way forward. As it is possible to identify use of science strategies of induction and double-blind testing at different points, there is overlap with strategic thinking from other disciplines. Those working in the respective fields will find points of difference and points of similarity with their strategic thinking practice. In financial strategy, strategic overlay looks at coordinating the strategies of different portfolios. Here we consider the operation of students, teachers, support staff, and scientists. We look at three different prototypes as technology portfolios for introduction, mid-range, and advanced users. We borrow from a number of military strategies. The simplest of these is the recognition of a strategic context. Clausewitz's center of mass is a much discussed as it is a highly allegorical expression of the idea of the key concept that enables a system. This explains the reasoning behind demonstrating quantum effects and spin that can't be done in the old system. Tracts on mechanized warfare illuminated the need for the equivalent of radio communication in each unit, the use of batteries as an equivalent to fuel, repair from the field, and coordination with other systems. Finally, there is the general concept of winning the peace or thinking through a positive transition that all buy into. Teaching spin. Teaching science without spin is like teaching US history without the 1776 American Revolution. If you were to open a school textbook, you would not expect to see a picture of the White House with a Union Jack proudly aloft. However, if you do search through a school textbook for a description of electron spin, you will see a ball revolving on its axis, with a North Pole axis pointing upwards and some lines indicating that the pole can be moved through the equator and point downwards. In the eyes of modern scientists, it looks to be the aspirational claims of those who believe the revolution of 1924, quantum mechanics, hasn't happened and the old regime of classical physics is still in power. Using the analogy of the American Revolution once more, even if you had the most cherished of reasons for saying King George was a charismatic genius that saved the day, you would encounter other difficulties in explaining the outcome of World War II, or the moon landing. In the classroom, teachers struggle to explain how silicon chips work, or indeed what is a quantum computer. This we propose stems from not grasping quantum physics. While the quantum revolution unlocked vast opportunities for the human race, it was bad news for the teachers. Until then they had been able to use the same basic technique over and over. See this globe over here, it's like the Earth but the Earth is a way bigger version of it. Or, see this model of a human cell, it's like your cells but they are a much smaller version of it. When they say see this yellow painted ball, it's just like an electron, it is a bit like hoisting the Union Jack on the White House. The quantum physics revolution says that big models don't work for small scales. Something not working is a deal breaker for scientists. In 1924, when Wolfgang Pauli began unpicking something else must be at play with electrons, he used the term hidden spin. Classical spin was not an option, because just scaling down the size of, say, the classroom yellow painted ball would have the surface move faster than the speed of light. Now for scientists, this means that this idea is not working. Then in 1928 someone called Paul Dirac rescued the situation by adding Einstein's special relativity to the fledgling quantum theory, giving us quantum spin and a number of other solutions thrown in. To those closely reading the history it's not classical spin. It's some sort of hidden, not classical, spin. It is quantum spin. The other solutions found. That is antimatter that was to be found to be a reality in 4 years' time in 1932. The practice of scaling down a large object does not work, but it is not a deal breaker for education. Nonetheless, it requires a methodical solution. The practice of scaling down has to be modified, and this modified practice has to be rolled out. Roll out is the domain of the technologically enhanced science demonstration. The modified practice is briefly described here, and the roll of prototypes developed so far directed towards the goal. It is first suggested to pretest the students about their knowledge of electrons. This should include drawing and labeling what they imagine. Secondly, using a suitably empty coffee cup, rotate it right way up clockwise and flip it to show that the rotation becomes anti-clockwise. The handle will show rotation more clearly than a smooth ball. In the third imagination stage, ask the students to imagine an electron expanded by the size of a billion. The formula for phones and calculators is 5.29E11*1E9 equals, with the answer is 0.0529 m or about 5 centimeters. This for an electron of hydrogen, and in this case it is spherical. It has no surface, therefore no inside or outside. This is unlike the cup. The 5 centimeters is an imaginary contour or bubble that has as much of the electron inside it as outside, and indeed extends forever. It has no parts, and no ability to cut a marking in it or place a marker on it like the cup handle. Thus, it can't rotate or classically spin. Unlike a coffee cup, it is a magnet. Thus, using a compass, you can find a north and south pole. These poles are locked exactly to the magnetic field no matter how weak it is. Not directly in line but pointing in a circle like a tottering top. At this stage it is best to show a gyroscope for which the mass of the central axis can be varied, showing how the pressure increases with increasing magnetic field. A ferrite magnet should be shown as an example of neighboring spins all influencing each other and casting their field in unison, reaching from the microscopic to our realm. It is at this point test prototypes come into play. Although radio waves and heat can and do cause electrons spin to flip, they do not spin in classical sense as a ball, coffee cup or gyroscope does, and also they do not flip. Unlike flipping a pancake, a macroscopic model, there is no point in time where the electron is half flipped. In terms of the pancake, this would be a point in time that the top of the pancake is 90 degrees to the pan. Instead, for an electron having something called 2-2 symmetry, the closest macroscopic analogy is pulling a sock inside out. To model the electron, now disclosed to be a magnet as well as a charge, a small magnetic sock is made. A north-south magnet is placed in the toe, and a ring south-north magnet is placed in the sock opening. This means the sock flips or turns inside out with a change in the prevailing magnetic field. The outside of the sock has a clockwise arrow, the inside an anti-clockwise arrow. This can be shown to effect in the primary school prototype test, which has a large bore solenoid. Proceeding from this, students can see spin arrows having an effect in the Einstein-de Haas test. The magnetic field changes in time to the oscillation of a torsion pendulum, causing it to rock. It is a more tortuous route from coffee cup to pendula, but the reward is that at the end a low-rigor explanation is not inadvertently reinforced by a quality quantum demonstration. The old way is a lot easier to present and move on. Simply read some text, hold a coffee cup, avoid ideas beyond the audience, and all is well. The newer method is more involved, with 5 or more sub-steps, but once underway there is a lot more science that the students are able to move on to. The reality is that if you were to teach quantum spin, it would be an outlay from the bulk of teaching. Extending the analogy of Antarctic exploration introduced earlier, it appears as a distant peak. It is difficult, and hence the new equipment and the expeditionary strategy and mindset to get there. Strategic appraisal. Traditionally, demonstrations aim to be a definitive portal to a concept that has over time been aligned with specific audience levels. The pool of demonstrations and concepts have rolled over year to year. The reimagined demonstrations have focused on a high level of rigor and unpacking the concepts within concepts, not unlike a Russian doll. The traditional lens of a demonstration focuses on the concepts and science that will be better understood having interacted with the demonstration. This traditional perspective is a one-to-one correspondence of concept to demonstration, concentrating on the direct audience demonstration contact time. The reimagined perspective expands the brief to look at the bigger picture impact of improved quality of concepts, the management, and manufacture. This picks up more costs and extends the scope of benefits. At certain points, the dynamic of strategic leadership has undergone, for want of a better word, phase transitions. Rather than attempting to communicate shortcomings through the existing system, an underneath new management frame of thinking has been adopted. This means moving from working with existent organizational strategies to an expeditionary or mission-focused strategy dynamic frame of thinking. We now have the interaction of smart technology, scientific expertise, and strategic management applied in a coherent manner. This focus, and a measure of good luck, has led to the development of a signature demonstration in a short time frame. The development process flowed through three tiered stages, the outputs of each flowing into the inputs of the next. As said, this is concept, research, and production prototypes. Like quantum mechanics, laboratory standards, ISO 9001, the prototype development cycle is outside the common practice of education. This means it is difficult to acquaint the general reader with theses ideas, suffice it to note the artifacts of working prototypes produced. Thus far additional capabilities have been loaded into the box with a demonstration, battery packs, control electronics, sensors, Wi-Fi, GPS, illumination, and electronic ink labels. This has seen the corresponding increase in cloud support of inventory management and synthetic podcasts. The next move, however, is to take some of the concepts being taught out of the box. The concepts can be thought of a Russian doll, containing concepts within concepts. These nested concepts are appropriate for necessarily less advanced audiences that have necessarily a more concrete and less formal relationship with the demonstration. In this case, this meant creating a hands-on electron in the primary school demonstration. There are two levels of prototypes below the advanced prototype seeking to best integrate with primary and middle school audiences. The primary prototype was constructed from components recycled from the research and production phase of the advanced Haas prototype. The research prototype initially required a large bore solenoid, while the production phase required test to destruction that yielded spare parts. The stage was set to have the primary audience participate in the design of the prototype. The designers were initially shown a single rare earth magnet tumbling in the large bore solenoid field as the field reversed. The idea was to place the magnet inside duck. When it appeared to dance, it was requested that the duck have an illuminated dance floor and controls for the dancing. The former was provided in a corona discharge flat sheet feed by a small transformer, the latter by capacitive not contact switches. A further request was the ability to hear the music that the duck was dancing to. This led to the installation of a tone-playing buzzer that reversed the field, with each note causing the duck to dance to the beat. The play was extended to a clear plastic egg with a magnet inside. The prototype design for manufacture allowed the developments to be implemented next day. Various extensions included the model of the quantum electron, magnetic compasses that showed inclination of the field, induction coils probes, and magnetic force probes. Thus far we have had an open brief to bring technology to bear on updating what is taught. Rather than planning a single standalone technologically enhanced demonstration, the innovations are blended coherently throughout schooling. A case in point is the teaching of spin that integrates the teaching of magnetic fields to generate a more nuanced model of the electron that is encountered in the advanced level demonstration. It is not simply building on better demonstration, but upgrading and expanding the entire field, putting it under new management. At each point a misconception is encountered. This triggers an examination of how the system of new demonstrations could be configured. A case in point is the often held belief that the maximum force felt by a bar magnet is in the region of maximum field strength. It is in fact the point of maximum field gradient, as can be discovered in the primary school configuration. This insight, if missing, makes it hard to understand the experiments that uncovered spin that use high field gradient to separate spin states in an electron beam. As we uncover a network of misconceptions, it provokes inquiry into engineering a network of correct concepts developed over the student's career. The emphasis of the